Thank you, Liz, and thanks for certainly the opportunity to be here today, but particularly to the person who decided to give this session the title, the System Affordability Constraint, because I think that's a very useful way of drawing attention to two quite related issues. One, as I think has been alluded to, we're dealing with a system that is changing relatively, given the nature of the beast we're talking about, relatively quickly, but one where there are strong linkages between each of its components, such that when you make changes in one, it impacts upon many of the other components. We often refer to it as a bowl of spaghetti. But when it's all said and done, and irrespective of, or perhaps more appropriately accounting for, the need for the system to meet other objectives, relating to system security and reliability and emissions, consumers need the system overall to be affordable. As vague a general term, perhaps as that might mean, it is certainly more tractable in the context of the specific circumstances of individual consumers or groups of consumers. And not just as an objective in its own right, but because of the flow-on effects to the rest of the economy. And it's really that which energy ministers demanded when they created the national energy objectives that sit in legislation and govern what the Commission can do and indeed can't do. In practical terms for the Commission, this means that when when rule changes are proposed to us, and as you know, to deal with a rule change, somebody needs to propose it to us. We can't just make it up ourselves. That we need to make sure that the cost of any change in one component of the rules, that we understand that its impact across the rest of the system, and we understand that impact, and hence can assess the effect of the system on the price that people pay. And those linkages is quite an important part of what the Commission does in assessing any of these rule changes, or understanding those linkages. Paula has spoken about the work that the regulator is doing to drive down costs in each part of the system. And I said the Commission, when it's considering the rules that both govern the way the networks are regulated, but also obviously the retail sectors and the wholesale sectors and the core power system itself, the Commission really does need to understand how those different parts of the market or the sector work, how they interact, and how changes in one part of the system are going to impact, for better or worse, on how the other parts work. And then in this sort of complex system like energy, and the complexity doesn't only come from obviously the nature of the beast. We must recognise that we operate within a federation which brings its own degrees of complexity into the nature of the issues that the Commission gets to deal with. And that in that context there are many players, many players that see one issue or an aspect of an issue that affects their interests the most as being the most important and the one that should be addressed. Our role, particularly when it comes to dealing with the rule changes that are put to us, is to assess those both within and across the different parts of the sector and assess them against this criteria of what is the long-term interests of consumers, what's going to deliver in the longer term the least cost solution for them in general. Now, in practical terms, again, we can deal with issues when people propose rule changes to us, and I'm always at forums such as this encouraging a greater, wider distribution, wider range of people to partake in those processes and indeed to initiate rule changes. And if you think there's a problem and you think it can be fixed through a rule change, then by all means, come and talk to us, and we can help you craft how that rule change might be put forward. But we also contribute through the nature of the reviews that the Commission does, our second function. We have regular ones like the regular annual ones, like those that are related to price trends, which tell us what over the next 3 years are likely to be the things that are going to drive prices either up or down. The idea being, and the reason COAG asked us to do this work a number of years ago, was really to identify which component or which aspect of the sector is going to be the dominant one in terms of driving price outcomes, and hence to provide an opportunity for those, depending on which sector it is and where it's coming from, but provide an opportunity for those that can to make decisions to change those outcomes if they don't meet their objectives. And in looking back in history of those price trends reports, the story that emerges is perfectly consistent with the historical work that the ACCC's been doing. It's a very consistent story. We also do annual competition reviews that tell us something about how the industry, particularly at the retail level, is actually evolving in terms of being able to offer better deals to consumers and bespoke services. The report that we did last year on price trends was actually referred to in part of the lead-up of the, I wouldn't say it's solely, but I think contributed to the decision by the Commonwealth Government to have a few meetings with the retailers, and out of that has resulted in a number of real change proposals being sent to the Commission that we have either dealt with in a fairly quick time or are dealing with at the moment. There's additional ones coming to us, I'm told, fairly soon, flowing from those meetings, as well as the work that Paula was referring to. Whilst they're annual ones, we also do one-off ones into particular topics as people think that there's a need to look at particular areas of interest. For instance, we've provided advice to state governments about the geographic and socio-economic characteristics of consumers on standing offers vis-a-vis market offers as an input to their own policy development processes. We've done a review of the East Coast gas markets, which resulted in some recommendations about reform in those gas markets that the Gas Market Reform Group under Dr. Vertigan now has the responsibility of implementing. And we're up to our ears in a review of the regulatory arrangements that govern the reliability of the power system, and given the degree of questioning or nervousness in some quarters about the capacity of the power system to maintain acceptable levels of reliability into the future, and in assessing what may or may not need to change in that sphere, the effect of any changes in the way reliability of the power system is delivered on price is naturally front and centre in the way in which the Commission is approaching those issues. So all of these our rule change proposal, or dealing with the rule change proposals, the regular reviews, and the if you like the topic specific ones, are all helpful in helping to either inform decisions that others are responsible for making, or highlighting issues that go to that sense that we're dealing with the system, and whatever else we need to do, the system needs to deliver the right sort of price outcomes. As a result of that, there are often some recurring themes, and for people who engage with us regularly, perhaps I'm a bit of a broken record, but out of that work there are some constant themes, such as the need to integrate emission reduction policy mechanisms with the way in which energy policy is done, and to be able to identify just what integration means. The importance of getting better, but not more, but better information to consumers so that they have a real option to shop around and to move from that passive category that people have spoken about to the more active one. and how the system needs to change given the technological developments that are occurring, be they at the big end of the system, if you like, and how power system security is maintained through to what we refer to as the distributed market model. What happens with distributed energy resources and their relationship with distribution networks. The other theme, I think, which comes out of that work is to beware of single solutions. And inevitably, particularly, I suppose, in an environment such as this, there is a temptation to reach for what people have referred to as silver bullets. And any sort of history or any sort of review of the work the Commission's done, the analysis we've done, the recommendations we've made, would highlight that inevitably what appears to be a nice shiny silver bullet may come with a big bag of ex post regrets. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you.